Well, joining me now to analyze for us, psychoanalyze the blame game and the cry for the opportunity to take personal responsibility in presidential politics. We're joined by clinical psychologist Dr. Catherine Smerling. Good to have you with us, Doctor. And Dr. Jeffrey Gardere, psychologist, assistant clinical professor at Touro College of Osteopathic Medicine. Thank you, Doctor.
Always a pleasure.
Your reaction to this blaming Romney for what he said and calling it twisting when what they do is roll the tape, as the saying goes.
Absolutely. One of the things that I find so strange about Obama is that he does not know how to apologize. He does not know how to humbly apologize, which would ingratiate himself with the American people. He took a stand which blamed someone else. And I don't know if it's because of his rigid sense of discipline or his rigid sense of structure, but it's obviously he made a mistake. He would be so much more endearing to the American public if he, like Clinton, in his own endearing way with all of his human foibles, was able to say, hey, I made a mistake.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And Doctor, I mean, you're talking about two men who are immensely likable as president, in Bill Clinton and President Obama. But in the former instance, there was great charm about President Clinton. That is absent in this president. What say you?
Well, I don't know whether the charm is absent. Perhaps he could be a little bit more humble, as you talked about. I think but strictly from the psychological point of view, that's how I avoid the politics.
Okay.
What I see here is perhaps some projection. It's not me, it's you. As you know, that's one of the defense mechanisms that is used by people who want to preserve a sense of self and as well as their image, so that may be part of what's going on. What may be missing in charm that I see in this particular president is that he can be very compassionate. As we saw with the shootings in Colorado, there was no better man, no better president to go in and console the families of the victims, and that's something that he may excel in. That being said, maybe there are other places in his personality that he certainly can continue to work on as he matures in life.
What I found so odd about this is that he's a wonderful orator. He's very careful with his words, and he flubbed this up immensely. And I just wonder if there's a crack in his personality or something else that is going on that would cause him...
When you say it, you're referring to the Friday the 13th comment in which he talked about the
small businesses. Yes. He's a wonderful orator. He really is. And this was such a flagrantly silly, insensitive thing to say.
Yeah.
And Jeff is right. He's a wonderfully compassionate
Well, what we
president.
see in defense mechanisms, it's usually an unconscious process because one desperately wants to hold on to self. But what does happen eventually is as the person does come to realize what it is that they have done and realize that they have used this defense mechanism and that they could have handled it by just simply being more humble, then perhaps they learn from that situation and do it better.
Doctor, I have to admit, I laughed when you said humble, because I've never seen even the no intimation whatsoever of humility on the part of this president. This man, whether you, and by the way, this is not the first criticism I would make of him. Certainly there are others that I think are far more relevant than arrogance, but humble is not a quality that seems even to exist. He can't even. It doesn't seem that there is any way for him to even think.
I see a very, very rigid structure and disciplined human being. Who was always ahead of the curve.
Yes.
And listen, he has accomplished a tremendous amount in a very, very short time.
That's right.
And he's had to have a lot of defense mechanisms to get there.
And what about Romney? Romney's sitting in London getting he's offended a few people by criticizing the games there, questioning how well they're going to go, the support. You talk about rigid and disciplined, and certainly that's, it sounds like you're describing Governor Romney in some ways. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. When I look at Governor Romney, here's another man who is also brilliant. I mean, he's built up a fortune, walked in and inherited a fortune also, but, he has maintained. He has maintained that fortune.
You interject that, but it's utterly wrong.
Okay.
He donated the fortune, and quote unquote, the amount of money that his father left him and most of it to the church.
Okay, but my point is, and I concede that to you. My point is, and humbly,
Well, no, it's not. It's just keeping the facts straight.
and humbly so, I might add. But
We know better.
this is no, absolutely. But this is also a very intelligent man. I think in politics, even though he was a good governor, he's still getting his sea legs as far as running for this presidency.
Yeah, but
certainly the people around him feel that he could be tougher. And I think they'd like to see a little bit more of a President Obama in him as far as being a very steely, having the nerves and just going for what it is that you want and holding on to that. Whereas President Obama maybe has overreached with that because of that discipline that you talk about. That's
Doctor, you get the last word. The quick word.
Obama really needs to project his presidency so he becomes someone that we can all look up to. Because right now he appears so wooden as a human being that we need to feel as though he can lead as well as admit his mistakes, as well as being more of a human being. We don't see him as a human being. We want to look at him as someone we can follow as our role model. And right now, he's not.
Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Humbly, I say thank you. Up next, new poll results.